Welcome to What's Brewing with IAT Insurance Group, where episode after episode we cover the latest marketplace trends with subject matter experts who are fueling our mission to provide insurance answers together. Grab your cup and let's settle in.
Hi, I'm Tom Rizzuto, and welcome to What's Brewing. I serve as Vice President of Management Liability Claim Services at IAT. I'm joined by my colleague Angela Roberts today, who is IAT's AVP of Management Liability Claims. Thanks for joining us today. We are going to talk a little bit about management liability claims, certain claim trends in the claim environment that we are focused on, and then we're going to talk a little bit about sort of our focus on claims and how we're looking to minimize the claims that we get in and really focus on resolution. So Angela, just for our audience, what are some of the common management liability claims that we may see when we're dealing with these types of issues?
So the policies have employment practices liability, directors and officers liability, fiduciary liability, and crime coverage, but we are mainly seeing employment claims under the management liability policy. And I would say that we're seeing a lot of disability discrimination claims, gender discrimination. I would say less race discrimination than we have in the past. A lot of retaliation claims coupled with discrimination claims, sexual harassment, hostile work environment.
I would say so. Since the Me Too movement, when sexual harassment claims probably were at their peak, do you feel like they've been going down since then? Consistent? What do you think?
I think they are probably down since then. I think during that time period, they were up substantially. So I think they have leveled out some.
I agree. I think some of the issues with sexual harassment claims is once we hit COVID, people weren't in the office, and I think that there weren't a lot of sexual harassment claims. They were going down. There were a few issues with people on Zoom and whatnot, but I think since people have been back in the office, I agree. I think they've been going down. I think disability claims is probably the biggest claims that we see. And so, what are some of the challenges with disability claims and why we see them so frequently?
I think disability claims are hard for a few reasons. I think disability is broadly defined. So maybe a company might not think of a disability as a disability, right? Because there are lots of things that characterize disabilities, and it's broad. So I think that's one issue. The second issue is when someone brings a disability to your attention, there are a lot of steps to take within the interactive process. And I think companies, if you're not well versed on the law concerning disability discrimination and what steps you're required to take, I think a lot of times the interactive process is missed, or at least parts of it are missed, which then comes the claim.
I agree. I agree. And some of the other challenges we're seeing is that we see a ton of claims in California, and California is its own animal with respect to not only disability claims, but employment claims in general. And I think some of the issues in California with respect to disability claims is that it's extremely hard to ever get rid of an employee who has a disability. You need to make sure you're giving accommodations routinely if they're asking for them. And then if they're out of the office, it presents a significant challenge as to, how long do they get leave? I know, both federal and state laws have their sort of leave requirements, but it seems like in California, they don't really even follow that law. Like, what do you think as far as, a company dealing with a disability claim, what's the most important thing with respect to someone being out on leave?
I think what's most important is the communication. So there has to be communication and a lot of it, and it has to be documented. So the interactive process is just that, it's interactive. So you have to go back and forth. If you're requesting, doctor's notes and you have to know how long they're out, what are their restrictions when they come back to work, what are the restrictions, can you accommodate those restrictions? And I do think you have to be very accommodating in your accommodations, right? So if there's any way to accommodate, I think the law requires you to do so, even if it's, I mean, it can be a burden, but you have to try to accommodate. And I think what happens is companies sometimes believe they can accommodate the restrictions and let the employee go, or they're out too long, and that then buys you the disability discrimination claim along with a retaliation claim.
I agree, and I think plaintiffs firms in California and the rest of the country are very good at pointing out maybe the one issue that you did not deal with, or the fact that this person was out for 6 months, a year. You could have gotten a temporary employee while they were out and hold their job open. And I think that's some of the issues that we see in some of the claims we get, is just the difficulty with how long do you leave this person's job open for? And it seems in California it may be indefinite, at least on issues that we're seeing. One of the other issues that you mentioned, retaliation, I always have thought with employment claims, retaliation is sort of a throw-in claim on almost every claim that we see. But talk through some of the difficulties with a retaliation claim, in the sense that, if there's an alleged discrimination and then a following retaliation, what could be some of the pitfalls that a company could fall into?
Well, I think if we're talking about disability discrimination, what I see so often is the employee is in fact having issues. They're having performance issues, some sort of performance or just issues within their job that they're not doing well. Then all of a sudden they go out on leave for a disability, whether it be a surgery, some other FMLA issue. So they go out, and now that they're out, the company determines, well, they were having performance issues. They're now going to be out for some unknown amount of time. We are just going to get rid of them and, hire someone else. And the company will say, well, it was performance related. The problem is they've now put you on notice of this disability, and you've now bought yourself a retaliation claim as well, because there's a timing issue. Anytime there is this protected activity, like the reporting of, a disability, or we see a lot of whistleblower claims, you report something that you believe is protected, and you're then terminated close in time. We see the retaliation claims from there. And the difficulty with retaliation is, I think that particular claim is the hardest to get rid of on motion practice. So that claim will usually take you through trial. Even if you can get rid of some of the other claims, I think the retaliation claim is the hardest one to get rid of, and will take you through trial. So you got to make a decision about how you resolve before that point.
I think you are directly on point with respect to the retaliation claims. I think sometimes, and we've seen this in the past, there may be an underlying discrimination claim or whatever else is accompanied, and then there is a retaliation complaint following. And many times I've seen the retaliation complaint actually survive the case going forward, but the discrimination is dismissed. And that presents another challenge for our insureds, right? You bring discrimination to them. I'm an employee, I bring a disability discrimination, and the insured company says, we did not discriminate here. We didn't do anything wrong. Yet they start taking action against this employee, whether they change their hours or they put them on different shifts, or they do something that now maybe they didn't even think about how they were doing it, but now you've retaliated against that person for complaining of the discrimination that was not there to begin with, and the retaliation complaint can move on and survive that, and becomes a bigger problem because it may actually exist. So we talk about these cases and the pitfalls of these cases, and obviously it seems like these are not cases that we're looking to try or litigate thoroughly. So, that brings us to resolution, right? And that's the biggest focus on employment claims for insurance companies, is how do you get to resolution, and what helps you get to that effect? So, some of the things that we've talked about, you and I, Angela, is sort of how are we pushing our claims people to get to resolutions. And I think a big part of that for us is the firms that we choose to handle these cases. And I know, many times insureds come to us looking to use their own firm and wanting to use a firm that they worked with in the past. But what separates our firms out from some other firms that might not do a lot of insurance defense work or might not handle these cases, day in and day out? What do our firms do that's different?
Well, I think that there is a philosophy that we share with them, and that is to try to resolve these claims early if possible before spending a lot of money defending them. And the reason that is, well, there's something called the fee shifting statute in these claims. And what that means is if we go forward and we try the case and we lose $1, not only are we on the hook for the dollar and our attorneys that we've paid through trial, we're also on the hook for the plaintiff's attorney's fees. And that is going to be a very high number. Courts have approved very high dollar figures for plaintiff's attorneys. So because of that, the risk is very great. So I think what we share with our panel attorneys is a philosophy of seeing if we could get these resolved for a reasonable amount before we spend too much money. And I think sometimes there's also, we have to get our insured on board, because these cases do come with a lot of feelings. When you're accused of discriminating against people, people have a lot of feelings about that, and they want to fight out of principle. The problem is fighting out of principle ends up costing a lot of money when we have to turn it into a business decision and make a business decision. All of our insureds are in business, so what I like to talk to them about is we got to put our business hats on and make a business decision, and how do we avoid the risk and spend the least amount of money to get out of this. And I think our firms share that philosophy with us. But with that said, if there's a case that needs to be litigated and moved forward, they are certainly very capable of doing that, very skilled litigators and experts in employment law.
I agree with that. And I can tell you and tell our audience that many times, especially in California, cases that do get litigated to trial, employment cases, I've routinely seen, high six-figure verdicts, seven-figure verdicts, eight-figure, and even some nine-figure verdicts in California for employment cases. Some of the venues in California are very employee friendly, and it's just not worth the risk in taking these cases to trial. And in saying that, resolution strategies are extremely important in trying to not only have our insureds spend the least amount of money in trying to get out of these cases, but obviously with IAT and other carriers, I'm sure that's their focus. Just piggybacking on that, what do you think are there other factors that come into play as far as driving down the cost of these cases and sort of trying to get into reasonable settlements?
I think it starts with our insured's internal practices. What sort of their HR departments, are they documenting performance issues? Are they consulting with outside or inside employment counsel when they're making decisions about their employees? I think some of those things can certainly reduce risk, but I do think documentation is key. We see a lot of claims where our insureds don't have the documentation to support the poor performance, and then it makes it difficult in that regard to show that really our decisions were performance based and nothing else. So I think it starts internally with what our insureds are doing with these employee issues.
I agree, and that's a perfect segue into sort of risk management and mitigation strategies. And one of the things that we are proud that we offer is that one of our firms gives free training for our insureds if they want it. We free 1 hour training on any employment issues that may come up for them, whether it's dealing with an employee who has disabilities or wage and hour issues or any type of issue that might come up that they need training for, sexual harassment training for their managers, as an example. And I think that you really hit the nail on the head in documentation. I mean, that is probably the biggest issue that we see that causes cases to be worth more money, is that, the reasoning for the employee being terminated is there, it's just not documented. And if you don't have the documentation, it becomes a he said, she said, and the onus is on the insured to provide, why did you do this? And if you can't show why you did it in documentation, it becomes very difficult to resolve for a nominal amount or a lower exposure. So some of the things our insureds can do, certainly make sure you're documenting all the employment issues that you have with your employees. And if you aren't insured of IAT, take advantage of our training that we offer. Our firms are happy to do it. Many of our insureds have done it. And, definitely take advantage of that because it can help you down the line. Angela, I really appreciate you sharing, spending some time with us. I appreciate the audience spending time with us and listening to our trends and challenges in the employment claim world and some of the things that we deal with on a day in, day out on management liability claims. Thank you for listening to What's Brewing, and we'll see you next time.
Providing insurance answers together is what we do best. Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of What's Brewing. Until next time.